All right, so it's just 1 minute after 9. So good morning from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I am Julia from Faculty of Medicine University Malaya, and welcome to this Hot Topics Research Ethics webinar. And this webinar is a joint effort by Mohre. Mohre has, and with our colleague from Berman Institute of Bioethics, John Hopkins University. And we have here me, Nisha, as well as Joe and Jeremy from JSU, and our guest speaker, Dr. Kazuto Kato, right? And next slide, please. This will be the first webinar for our third year of Hot Topics in Research Ethics. We normally arrange for 4 webinars in each year. So these are the previous webinars, and we have the recorded webinar in the More website, as well as the John Berman Institute website, and we can share you the link in the chat box if you're interested to listen to previous webinar. And I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Master of Health Research Ethics, or we call More. More is a joint is a program, that a collaborative effort by John Hopkins University and University Malaya, supported by the NIH grant, where we started this Master of Health Research Ethics program, and it is based in University Malaya, and we are coming to our 4th cohort of students. Next slide. So this More is a 1-year program, and aim to produce students who are well-versed in research ethics and is able to further advance and develop research ethics in their own country or regional. And it is a full-time 1-year program. The intake normally starts in October, sometimes usually in September, but because COVID the academic year starts in October, and the registration time or the application time varies. With this collaboration also offer scholarship for students from low middle income countries, and for each batch we have around 10 to 12 students. For this year, we have 12 students. Previously, we have 9 to 10 students. And next slide, please. Right. So, all right. So, sorry. So if you are interested to know more about More, I will paste the link to the chat box there if you want to know more, and we'll be happy to answer any queries with regard to More. As with other webinar, right, you can post your question and answers in the chat box, and I and Jeremy will look at it and try to address the question during discussion. This session will be recorded like the previous one, and it will be made available in the More and Berman Institute website. Next slide, please. Right, so over to you, Jeremy, to introduce our invited speaker for today's session.
Okay, terima kasih. Thanks, Julia. And it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker, Kazuto Kato, a colleague and friend for a long time. He's a leading force in bioethics, coming from Japan. He's currently the professor and chair of the Department of Biomedical Ethics and Public Policy in the Graduate School of Medicine at Osaka University. But he has a global reach, and so he's also an academic affiliate at the Center for Health Law and Emerging Technologies called HELEX at the University of Oxford. And Kazuto has an interesting background in that he trained as a scientist before getting into the bioethics space. And so he's able to take on some of the issues like the one he's going to talk about today with knowledge of the science as well as the ethics. Currently, he's the ethics committee chair for the International Society for Stem Cell Research, which relates in some ways to what he'll also be talking about. But one of the main reasons we got him to be the expert on point here is he was a member of the Expert Advisory Committee on developing global standards for governance and oversight of human genome editing. And he was a member of that group that was tasked by the World Health Organization. He's got over 100 peer-reviewed papers, and he is actually a wonderful host and friend. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Kazuto. He's going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. And you can put things in the Q&A area now or as soon as you hear them, and we'll try to address them as time goes on. So let me turn it over to you, and welcome to Maury's Hot Topics.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's my pleasure to be able to present in this important seminar, and I'm looking forward to chatting and interacting with lots of active people, particularly in Asia. So I now share my slide.
Looks good.
Okay, yes, so looking good, okay. So I thought I would do three things, and with the theme of genome editing governance. And I'm going to introduce what has been happening in the past several years, including what I have experiencing. And also, along with the presentation, I will tell you my observations, particularly in terms of inclusivity to the governance activities. And then I'd like to chat with you with Q&A and discussion session. So the first slide briefly tell you about the technology, genome editing, and this is one area of application of the technology. But what you see on the left is a kind of a conventional method for gene therapy for genetic diseases. And what you see here is they use so-called virus vector to activate and to insert functional gene into the chromosome of the cells, and then make this cell gene expressed in the cell. So when you have a mutation, disease mutation in the gene, you add a functional gene, normal gene, like this. So it's addition of a gene, and long history. This area has a long history with some successful examples. And however, it has a possibility of cancer gene activation if the gene is inserted around cancer genes. What you see on the right is a new area of activity using genome editing technology. And this involves correction of a mutation. And you have a normal gene as a DNA fragment, and you see recombination of DNA. And what you have is a functional normal gene, in a way, corrected. So correction of mutations and safe and accurate, and also possible to cure dominant mutation. Dominant mutation, okay? Although the technology is not yet perfect. So the famous system is called CRISPR system, right? And it was only reported in 2012. So it's still very new, but it is so powerful that already the Nobel Prize has been awarded. And the prize has been awarded to two researchers, female researchers, and Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna, and it was in 2020. So less than 10 years of the discovery, reporting of the scientific paper. So because of the powerful technology, it is used in a wide area of research and application. So you can find more details in the report by the WHO committee. But if I go quickly about area of research and application, and also purposes shown like this. Basic or preclinical research in vitro, including research on human embryos or in animal models in vitro, and also prenatal in utero and postnatal somatic genome editing. This is often used, aimed for so-called somatic therapy. And then potentially heritable genome editing may be possible, but this is a controversial area. And also the purposes could be very broad. And number one is to alter genes or their activities in various cells for basic and preclinical research, and to treat genetic disorders, to avoid inheritance of genetic disorders, and to treat infertility, to maybe promote disease resistance, and to enhance human traits. But this is a hypothetical. And I don't mean you should do that, but this is a kind of a possibilities and described in the report. So what the key point is that this is a very powerful technology and used by so many researchers and also those who wants to develop therapies. So I want to go through, well, very quickly, what has been happening in the last, well, 7-8 years. So it's so quick and you have to excuse me, but I want to keep my presentation short. So intense discussion and debates have been happening mostly since 2015. And the first event was a publication of a research paper of genome editing on human embryos by a Chinese group. But this was a decent research, but people, in a way, surprised that somebody went ahead to work on human embryos with genome editing. And there were many things in between, but in the end of the year, there was a first international summit in Washington, DC, organized by academies. And what they concluded was that basic research using somatic cells and germline cells should be promoted, and clinical application is beneficial with somatic cells, but heritable germline gene modification should not be allowed at that point. And then numerous articles and policy documents were published after the summit and before the second summit. Yes, this is the second summit. And as some of you may have heard, in the second summit, 3 years after the first summit, which was held in Hong Kong, a Chinese scientist announced that twin babies were born after their genomes were edited to give resistance for HIV infection. So this made so many people know that this is a quite controversial and important area. And then there are some reports, including WHO committee reports, which I will talk more in detail in later slides. So I wanted to share with you what was presented in the first summit. So they said heritable germline gene modification shouldn't be allowed. And this was a kind of reasons they presented. So germline editing poses many important issues, and because of these, shouldn't be conducted. So number one is a risk of inaccurate editing. So this is a more for scientific reasons, and off-target and mosaicism are the potential problems. And the difficulty of predicting harmful effects. I think this is a kind of both scientific and ethical issues. So what it means is that it is very difficult to predict what is a bad gene and what is a beneficial gene. Therefore, you have to be very careful when you design any modification. And then the third one is the obligation to consider implications for both the individual and the future generations. Often people say that the individual hasn't given consent for the modification of the gene. And also once introduced into the human population, the alterations would be difficult to remove because as I showed you in this first slide, it is very natural modification. And then there is a possibility of permanent genetic enhancement. And if in the future, society allows this enhancement, there may be some disparity and inequalities. Those who can utilize this and not being able to utilize that. And final point was moral and ethical considerations in purposely altering human evolution. Well, whether human themselves can change the genome of humanity. That was in a way, philosophical question. So with these, the first summit said you shouldn't continue to do that. So I show you some examples of the sort of the publications we saw in 2015. So this was a perspective article published in Journal Science in March. And what you see here are very leading scientists as well as some social science scholars. And you can see Jennifer Doudna here, the person who invented the technology, but also you can see some names such as Paul Berg, who were involved with the early discussion for the recombinant DNA technology. So these people said, you have to be careful and a prudent path forward should be considered and you have to go very carefully. And also the President Obama administration gave a note in this area in the year 2015. And what you see here is that they supported the activities for the summit by the academies, you see. And also they said the administration believes that altering the human germline for clinical purposes is a line that should not be crossed at that time. So this is a very strong statement. And then the first summit came and the conclusion were announced and published. So what I'd like to tell you is that there are many, many things happened between 2015 and 2018. But I, because of time, I don't go into many of these things, but I only show you one thing, and which was a report published by the National Academy of Sciences and Medicine of the United States. So it was in 2017, sort of 2 years after, well, 1.5 years after the first summit. And in this report, there is a need for caution in any move, but that caution doesn't mean prohibition. And this report said it recommends that germline genome editing trials might be permitted if a lot of conditions are fulfilled. And I don't go into details today. And if you like to read this, just to get the report, please. But there are 10 conditions listed in the report by the National Academy of Sciences. So this is very strict. But the point is that they said it might be permitted. Okay. So some years after the first summit. But what happened in 2018, as many of you may know, that Chinese researcher announced that he succeeded in carrying out direct clinical application of germline genome editing. And twin girls were born after genome editing. And that was to prevent HIV infection. And so the safety was not guaranteed and ethical procedures were not very well done. So it was considered as irresponsible and not conforming to the international ethical norm. So there are lots of denouncement and criticisms around the world. So actually, I want to ask the audience today to think about two questions. So one is, what do you think about the possibility of using genome editing to modify human genome and produce a child with a gene edited? And do you permit it or not? And I also like to ask you this question. Do you think the debates and discussion regarding the scientific, ethical, and social issue of human genome editing have been inclusive enough? Although I have the limited time and didn't show you lots of activities, many of the activities, but it is clear that there have been global level discussion and discourses and lots of debates in terms of the use of this technology. And I have been involved with many of those activities. But I still feel you have to ask this question, whether the discussions are inclusive enough. And I want to ask your opinions. For example, do you think relevant stakeholders in your country have participated in these kind of global discussions? So for the first question, I'd like to go into a bit more further. And this is a report by the, again, National Academy of Medicine and National Academy of Sciences of the United States. But it was a collaboration with the Royal Academy, Royal Society of the United Kingdom, together with members from Japan, Malaysia, well, yeah, that's right, Malaysia and Canada, China, India, South Africa, Sweden, and France. So this was meant to be quite international, but still led by American academies and the UK Academy. And they published a report, Heritable Human Genome Editing, shown here, and September 2020. So this is different from 2017 report. But this was, in a way, a little bit advanced because of this. So the report described 6 categories of the potential use of genome editing. And the first one is cases in which all of the prospective parents' children would inherit disease-causing genotype or serious monogenic disease. So all of the children are sick, will be sick. And that's the case number A, case A, category A. And B, cases in which some, but not all of the prospective parents' children would inherit a pathogenic genotype for disease, a serious monogenic disease. And then C is cases involving other monogenic conditions, and D, cases involving polygenic diseases, and E, cases involving other applications, such as the some kind of elimination of certain diseases, and also conditions that cause infertility. What I want you to know is that the report said, meaning the commission, the group, concluded that it is possible to define a responsible translation pathway for initial uses only in category A and very small set of circumstances in category B. I hope you understand what I mean. They said these cases may be okay, may be permitted. And this one shows more exact potential pathways for the category A and some part of B. So you see, this is a methodology development and the decision by the country level, and then clinical evaluation. So this was a picture diagram shown in the report. So it is a translation pathway proposed in the academy report. Of course, they didn't say you should do it or you can easily do it, but they said you have to be very careful and you have to carry out very extensive societal discussions and deliberations. And if the society says, okay, you can go ahead. But still, you can notice that there is a difference between what has been announced in the first Washington summit and the situation in this area. And I'd like to ask whether all of the countries around the world are ready to have this kind of extensive discussions. And actually, I am a little bit doubtful. So only quite advanced countries can have this kind of system and discussions. I'd like to discuss with you. Okay, so contrary to the International Commission report, WHO's committee didn't say what can be done, what should be done. Instead, this WHO committee proposed strengthening activities for the governance of the technology. So I will, in the rest of my talk, I would introduce what WHO committee has done. So the committee has been established in 2019, early 2019. Actually, they say the committee was announced in late 2018, which was just after the Hong Kong summit. So the committee had a diverse membership and all WHO regions and continents are represented, and countries covered 15. And you can see the list here. And most of the countries had only one member, but South Africa and the US had multiple members. Therefore, the number of the members were 18. And the disciplines and area of expertise were very diverse. And the charge of the committee were to examine the scientific, ethical, societal, legal challenges associated with human genome editing. And we also decided that we work on both somatic and germline editing. And then to advise WHO Director General and make recommendations. And from 2019 to 2020, 3 meetings were held and many online consultations with many stakeholders around the world, including patient groups and some indigenous groups were conducted. But the committee does not state what kind of application of genome editing technology is permissible or not, although it emphasized that clinical application of heritable human genome editing should be prohibited. So in 2021, July, summer, 2 reports were published. So one was a framework for the governance and the other one was recommendations. And this is more like a textbook for all of the stakeholders, particularly the government policymakers around the world, to find out what kind of tools can be used for governing the technology and what kind of institutions and processes should be strengthened, and Today, I don't go into details of this report, but I just want to say that the definition of the governance, which should be strengthened to control the human genome editing technology, is coming from UNESCO. And governance is a structures and processes that are designed to ensure accountability, transparency, responsibility, and so on. And governance also represents norms and values and rules of the game, but also governance is about culture and institutional environment in which citizens and stakeholders interact among themselves and participate in public affairs. So therefore, this report covers so many areas of the society and the world, but we are asking all of the member states, more than 190, to look at this and strengthen the governance of the technology. So I now turn to the recommendations. So there were 9 recommendations described in the report. And the number 1 is a leadership role. And the number 9 is about the review. So the substance are from number 2 to number 8. So I will go quickly about some of these. So, oh yes, number 3 is also important. Please make registries to monitor the activities around the world. That was number 3. Number 4, international research and medical travel. And the WHO should develop measures to prevent irresponsible research, to conduct unethical research in the country with lax regulations. We say ethics dumping. Bad one goes to loose regulated country. And the WHO should work on to prevent this. And this is about illegal, unregistered, unethical, and unsafe research. So the committee recommended that WHO take the lead in establishing a reporting system when unethical research is about to be conducted. You know that for the Chinese incident in 2018, reported in 2018, some American researchers seemed to have known a little bit, but they didn't have any place to report. That's my understanding. But if the WHO can establish a reporting place, maybe in the future, people can report more actively, proactively, yes. And number 8, values and principles. And the committee was particularly conscious about benefits and risks, both benefits and risks, that could be found in low and mid-income countries. So particularly the somatic gene therapy utilizing genome editing should be available, not only in the so-called rich countries, advanced countries, but also low and mid-income countries. Therefore, this description about values and principles are quite extensive. And I only show you some, but inclusiveness, fairness, solidarity, global health justice, these are very important. And people have to make sure that all of the people around the world should get benefit from this remarkable technology. That's what the report said. So finally, I'd like to introduce the education, engagement, and empowerment section. In the recommendation, the report said the Director General should call upon the United Nations Secretary General. So this is one level higher, to establish a United Nations inter-agency working group on frontier technology. So this is not just genome editing, but also other frontier technology, such as genome analysis, artificial intelligence, and synthetic biology, And so we said, yes, United Nations Secretary General, please facilitate this global dialogue. And also importance of inclusive dialogue, and also please prepare models of best practices. And also please make efforts to include decision-making and underrepresented groups interested in human genome editing. And we also emphasized the importance of bi-directional activity. So we said meaningful public engagement that increases the voices of those outside traditional science and policy circles, and encourages circulation of information, views, and values is imperative. So really the inclusive approach has been emphasized. Of course, I have to say that during the deliberation of the committee, the committee did so many consultation activities, including civil society organization and indigenous groups and industry association, private companies, and so on and so on. And you can see the number of the people who have contributed to the outcome of the reports. So I have to say that, but yet I still feel that this is not yet completely achieved. So what do you think about this? Have you heard about your colleagues talking about genome editing in your countries? I'd like to hear your views. And actually I find people who potentially I could collaborate for this large, big issue. And I finished my presentation by showing this slide. What we have been observing is that for genome editing, there has been quite extensive global and international discussions. And also, at least in some countries, there have been country-level discussions quite a lot. And some countries made regulations tighter, such as in China, and so on. But still, I think we still have lots of things to do, and particularly regional forums and regional interactions and regional discussions may help. So as a researcher working in East Asia, I am interested in working with Asian regions. And so far, I don't see many colleagues, say from Southeast Asia, participating into these global activities, though I may not know myself, and I have to know. So please tell me if you find activities. So thank you for your attention, and let's have a question and answer and discussion time.
Great. Thank you so much, Kazuto. That was a whirlwind of a lot of material that you managed to put in a perfectly timed half hour. So that was good precision, on target. So
yes, yeah, I tend to watch my watch.
That's great. So we would love to open it up to everyone. We don't have any questions in the Q&A portion yet, but what I'm just going to encourage participants, the easiest way for you to do it is to put your questions in the Q&A section. And if not, I'm just going to have a great conversation with you because you raised a lot of questions for me. So maybe we can start with something that was interesting and I hadn't appreciated it before. You mentioned about how much engagement had taken place while your committee was deliberating. And I think that's really an important observation. And I'm just wondering, as you call for more engagement, I'm wondering, how did the committee use, or are there any examples of how you used the information that you obtained, or did it alter or change how you were thinking about the problems by what you heard from people?
Oh yeah, well, thank you. First, who the committee was, who the committee consulted, the list of the people and list of the organizations people represented listed in the pages and pages in the later half of the governance report. So you can see who were there, and remarkable variety. And I think most impressive one example for the results of the engagement is those who are working in the indigenous groups in South Africa, and also some other areas. And I didn't participate in person to the South African meeting, the third meeting of the committee, but the committee invited many, many people who working on or who are part of the activity representing African indigenous groups. And they said the powerful people from the so-called North came and work and went back, and they had a kind of still impression that they are exploited in terms of the general medical, particularly genomic research.
Okay.
Okay, so that means they warned that any future utilization and development using genome editing technology for therapy or industry should take care of the need of the local people, and should take care of the fear they have. And so that pushed the committee more to think about inclusivity and fairness and solidarity and so on.
Okay.
So that had a strong impression to the committee.
No, that's great. It's interesting how emerging data can actually influence policy and ethics arguments. And so it's a nice example to demonstrate that. So there is now a question in the Q&A section. It says, have ethicists consulted with patients and patient groups with devastating genetic diseases regarding ethics of genome editing? Thank you.
So you need to explain to me again.
So the question, I think you mentioned some of this. The question is, have ethicists consulted?
Yeah, I can see that. Yes.
Yeah.
Consulted with patients with yeah. Oh yeah. I think the committee, WHO committee, also all of the leading professionals, including ethicists around the world, for the global discourses and deliberations, of course, talked with people who have who are patients and also patient advocates with devastating genetic diseases. So I think that is the reason why we took a neutral position as a WHO committee. We, for the moment, should be prohibited, but in the future, it may be permitted. So, but for the time being, until decent discussions and until decent system is in place, the harmful activity should be prohibited. Therefore, the strengthening governance is important. So we do know how much disease people, patients, and their groups are wanting to have this potential beneficial therapy. That we also know that. Yeah, we didn't prohibit. We didn't say complete no, but we say how we can strengthen the world to maximize the benefit. Is this okay?
Yeah. No, that's helpful.
Thanks.
So the next question comes from one of our More's graduates. Grizel asks, thank you so much for your talk. How do we increase awareness and knowledge of the potential of genome editing? Debates and discourse are important, but how do we nudge for more action? And then how to engage with government stakeholders. So a complicated set of questions there.
Yes,
But in several ways is
I
first
do.
increasing awareness and
Okay.
then moving from debates to action, and then how engagement with government. So you may want to take that in small bites, otherwise you're going to be very full.
Yeah. Give me one bit and one bit, and so how to? Yeah, I rely on you, Jeremy.
Okay.
So
First would be, I think,
increasing the awareness. Yeah.
yes.
I know that is a very challenging, and particularly because I work on ethics of, for example, more practically performed area, such as pre-implantation genetic testing. And it is also quite ethically controversial, and the rules are diverse depending on the countries. And Japan has a very, very careful, in a way, conservative at the moment approach. And I work on that area as a ethics professional. And what I see is that citizens and patients are feeling more close to the technology because they are already performed. Okay, and for the genome editing technology, it is coming, of course, and I hope, particularly for somatic genome editing, actual applications and therapy should come as soon as possible. But the heritable one is still very, in a way, hypothetical, although some people are very strongly wanting. So it's difficult to ask wider citizens and patients to think about this bit of future technology rather than the currently ongoing technology. So I think I'm hoping that together with those, say, PGT or some other areas of the medical technology, we can combine them, and which one is necessary and which one you think okay, or and so on and so on. Sorry, I stop here.
Okay.
And
I think
second one.
it is a complicated area, because I think there's been awareness, and one of the pieces is you hear awareness that comes out of bad cases, right? So
Yeah,
you had mentioned
right.
the Chinese case with Dr. He, and it caused it sort of tainted the science in a bad light. And then you have scientists are often looking for good stories to tell so that they can advance their interests and the interests of others. And I think increasing awareness, I think, is a challenge, because so you don't have complete control over the message. There's
I suppose awareness of the policymakers and regulators is quite important. If they aware that we have to prevent bad ones like the Chinese incident in those countries, they will begin having engagement and discussions with wider societal members, which is happening slowly, though, in Japan.
Okay. So it's interesting. There was a lot of, it seems like a lot of effort and resources went into your reports. And it must have been very costly. And then there was the pandemic the COVID-19 pandemic, which played on top of that, which I think is in some ways distracting, but also sort of changes priorities in science. How at all, if at all, did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the work of your committee and its understanding of where genome editing questions compare to sort of a major public health crisis? Was there any weighing or considering of these larger issues?
Yes, I say briefly two things. One is that although we had the difficulty of close discussions by losing in-person meetings, but the online meetings worked quite well particularly because the members are spread around the world. And particularly today's topic of inclusivity, I felt equal on online platform rather than going to Geneva or Washington. That's your place and not my place. But on Zoom, we are equal. And the second point is that the COVID-19 issue made us more aware and emphasize more about the importance of solidarity and global health justice, as you see about the vaccination disparity around the world that we still have currently. And that made us more strongly about the need of the global collaboration and inclusiveness and solidarity and so on. So we take it positive. And
good.
Yeah, thank you.
So I noticed that I saw somewhere that there's another meeting being scheduled of your group, if I'm not correct, and for next year sometime. Did I see that correctly? There's another summit.
Yeah, that's not my group, but also I was a member of the organizing committee of the second summit. There will be a summit, the third summit, which was planned this year, March 2020. 2022. Oh, yeah, that's anyway. Next year in London. You can still register, I suppose. And in London, the third summit. And I think they are also, again, conscious about hearing and engaging with broad area of the stakeholders. Yes.
And what's the relationship of that summit to the work that your group's already accomplished?
Oh, you mean the WHO committee?
Yeah.
Yeah. The summit is organized by academies, led by American academies, US academies, and UK Royal Society. And WHO is United Nations activity. So simply put, they are separate. WHO is for United Nations activity, which I see more diverse, including low and mid-income countries. And academies is because that's academy, scientifically strong countries could potentially take relatively leading role. I say relatively because they try to be broadened, you see? And then WHO members are invited into the summit, and actually, in effect, the third summit, the leader of the organizing committee is Robin Robertbach from the United Kingdom, who was a member of WHO. So in this third summit, they try to combine. Yeah, I hope I was clear enough.
No, it's a confusing space, but I think knowing how
things
fit together is quite important. We're nearing the end of our time. I don't know if you did anything else before we finish up. We just have just about 5 minutes left. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box. And I just wonder if you had anything else you wanted to close with before or any of the other panelists would like to weigh in with a question.
Yeah, maybe I'd like to hear anything from Julia.
Right. So this is quite new.
I don't hear you well.
You're on mute. I think you're not on mute, but we can't hear you, Julia.
But I'm from my phone, so maybe that's the
now we can.
problem. All right. Okay. So as a rehab physician, I work a lot of people with disability, including children who are born with genetic problem. And I know that from your talk that, of course, the scientists are really geared up to advance this technology. But with regards to the non-scientific community also a community. Are there any particular group or people from a particular region who are really pro to this, really supporting this technology, as to opposing? Because I am aware that even people who have the condition, some of them oppose to this gene editing themselves, namely because they feel that them being in this condition, they are not good enough and you need to alter the gene to make them better. So, I mean, yeah. So is there
Oh,
any
yeah, thank you
particular
for-
society? Yep.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because this issue of governance and ethics of genome editing covers so many variety of areas, and I didn't go into that issue. Maybe I should have more. And I think some people want this technology to be used for preventing diseased child born for their families and groups. But other people think that if the technology is utilized, they are the ones, well, those with that disease will be eliminated. And simply put, eugenic thoughts could enhanced. And I think all the people professional around the world should be extremely aware of this area of conflicting thinking. And you have to value those who have diseases, and you have to maximize the societal system so that they can fulfill their equal lives. And that is crucially important. And so inclusivity, which I mean today, is not just some patients, but patient groups with variety of views, okay, who has some of whom have opposing views of advancing these new medical technologies. And I myself experiences quite a lot already using PGT-M, so-called M, monogenic PGT. There is a question now? No?
No,
Okay.
it's an announcement.
Oh, announcement. Okay. So thank you for Julia, particularly important point. And I think that my final point is that we really have to be talking to people, and rather than making rules, and rather than gathering in high-level tables, but we really have to be talking to people, and we have to appreciate the variety of views and how to incorporate those sometimes conflicting views and still make a decision as a society. So I really think that the first translational pathway, before you step ahead, I really want to see the wide variety of global discussions, not only in so-called advanced countries, but also in say Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America, and so on. And I don't want to see one country says, okay, we've done enough discussion, and then we will go ahead. I don't like it. So in a way, I'm slightly different from the view expressed by the Academy 2020 report. I can say this in this kind of a broad audience.
Yeah.
And WHO are asking more engagement and more discussions. So that is a difference between some scientific discussions and the WHO committee discussions.
Right. So Kazuto, that was very helpful and a nice way to end the conversation. So thank you for joining us. We will ask people as you sign off, you'll get an anonymous survey to complete. Please do that. It helps us not only evaluate this session, but also figure out what would be interesting to all of you who've participated today. It's a bit far out, but our next hot topics in research ethics session will be Professor Effie Villena from ETH Zurich, and she's going to be talking about the ethics of decentralized clinical trials. So a different, totally different set of topics, but she's a good speaker as well, and so I hope you join us for that. And we're all applauding and thanking you from all parts of Zoom land. So have a good day or good night wherever you are, and thanks for joining us. Bye.
Right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you for this
Bye.
opportunity.
Thank you very
Goodbye.
much.